So, Prometheus. Well, I guess I can cover who's starring in the movie. You got Naomi Rapace playing Elizabeth Shaw. She'd be a doctor type person. I think she's actually Dr. Shaw. Anyways, then you got Michael Fassbender as David, Charlize Theron as Meredith Vickers, Idris Elba as Janik. Didn't even know he had a name. Guy Pearce plays Peter Wayland. Guy Pearce is in such heavy makeup you can hardly tell it's him. And then for the most part, like you really don't have anyone else who's left. You really don't know. But I'll mention one of the other characters, which is Charlie Holloway, played by Logan Marshall Green, whom he seems very familiar. I want to see if I've seen any. Oh, he was in Devil. That's why I recognize him, because I saw Devil. I guess he was in 24. He's mostly a TV actor for the most part, it looks like. But sorry, I had to just look to see if there was anything that I'd seen it, because he looked familiar. Well, anyways, the beginning of the film is kind of like a long credit sequence. It's kind of establishing where we're going to be at planet-wise, not necessarily where they're going to land. But anyways, we get an idea of what this planet looks like, which is kind of like isolated. Kind of reminds me of kind of like the Scandinavia, and kind of like that whole Ireland, Scotland, Finland, kind of along those lines, and you kind of get an idea. There's a lot of Greenland there. There's quite a bit of mountainous areas, and that's about it. And like I said, it's a long title sequence, and you see this alien ship, like in the shape of an egg. It was really weird, and it flies up, and there's this really ripped white alien dude, and he's an alien, and he just stands there and he drinks this black liquid out of this, like little shot glass, and he drinks it, and all of a sudden he's like, oh, and he starts like falling apart, and he was standing right by a waterfall, and he falls in, and that kind of leads into the title Prometheus, and this is where I think it's like we're in the year 2090 or 88 or 2092, something along those lines. Well, anyways, Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway, both doctors. I'm trying to think of the right word, because it's not paleontologists, because that's dinosaurs. Archaeologists, there we go. They seem to be more along the lines of archaeologists. And Elizabeth Shaw is chipping away at this little area, and she ends up opening up this cave. And I mean, like, you see her chipping away, and she has her flashlight, and then it just kind of fast forwards through the whole of them demolishing a wall to get into this, this kind of area that has this painting, and it shows this guy pointing up to the sky, and it has this, like 6 or 7 stars. I don't remember what it was, but the thing that catches Shaw's and Holloway's attention is the fact that it's drawn exactly like all these other, like Egyptians, Mayans, all these former societies, and why they all have the certain collection of stars in the exact same way. So this is like their big breakthrough. So now we're essentially 2 years in the future now, and this is where we get introduced to David, played by Michael Fassbender. He's, as far as it looks like, he is the only one that's operating the ship, mostly because, and we know this from the get-go, if you paid any attention to Prometheus, is that he's an android, a robot type, someone who looks like a human, but his mannerisms are very robotic, and his tone is, for the most part, I would say like borderline sympathetic. The way he's, whenever he talks, comes off, he, kind of like a butler, that kind of thing. Well, anyways, it's been like 2 years, 9 months, like 30 days since they set off, and of course thankfully they cut the crap and they show them reaching the planet, which I don't recall us getting a planet name at this point. And I guess you're wondering where the name Prometheus comes from. It comes from the, I guess I could say, Greek philosophy, which is this is the guy who supposedly created mankind. So it kind of has a double meaning, as well as the ship that they happen to be on is called the Prometheus. So there you go. Well, anyways, everyone wakes up. You kind of establish the characters in a sense. And so then this is where Shaw and Holloway kind of explain why they're here, what caused them to come here, and so they land planet side. And of course, like, they're super excited. They're like, this is Christmas Day. I want to open my presents. I want to go through this, this structure. So, like I said, this is kind of where we are shown a lot of these characters, these secondary characters like Fifield, Milburn, Chance, Ravelford, that kind of stuff. Like they're the guys you'll see around for the most part, but they don't have a lot of lines. They're just kind of there in the background. And some of them I might have named were actually Idris Elba's like co-pilots, if you will. Like Jadek is the pilot of the ship, and that's about it. Like Idris Elba doesn't have a whole lot going on in the film, to be frank. So I guess, and this is going to be kind of difficult because I'm kind of leading up to a point where almost want to stop. So I'll explain them going through this. So I don't remember if it was Milburn or if it was Fifield. You know, one of those guys. They're a geologist, so they have these little devices that scan the entire area that are like as long as there's some place to go around it, the these devices will kind of map out the area. Of course, this is the future, so it's okay to create devices like this. So, and the guy seems like he could be like like I kind of wondered what his purpose was, and then he's a geologist, but he has this kind of whole punk rock attitude to him. So you'll be a little like thrown off kilter by his character and like what he does. Let's see here. So, for the most part, it's just kind of a like this is where a lot of people might think that maybe this is where a lot of the whole alien, the whole scare tactic thing, and I guess there's a lot of high tension because like them trying to find out if this is where mankind came from, that whole deal. There's a lot of tension. There's that whole because it's very dark hallways, and I guess you could say like they're mostly in a cave for the most part, it seems, and so it's a lot of dark. There's a lot of dead bodies of these, and I should say that Shaw and Holloway kind of nicknamed these predecessors the engineers, and essentially Shaw and Holloway are trying to prove that the engineers made us, that essentially they're the step up from us, and you know, so that's kind of what they're trying to answer here. And so there's a lot of philosophical stuff that goes on with this movie about like who created us, that whole deal. And I'll just leave it this. There's a storm that's coming towards the ship, so of course this forces Shaw and the rest to have to leave kind of in a bit of a rush. And of course this is where tension kind of gets high because where Shaw and Holloway happen to be is in this room. It has this big old head. No explanation for the head, by the way, as far as I know. I don't remember them actually giving us any information on this particular stone face that we see. And these canisters are kind of melting and bubbling a little bit. David ends up taking one. He like he like super freezes it and takes it. And Shaw ends up taking the decapitated head of one of the engineers and takes that. Let's see what else there is. Well, anyways, like I said, that forces them to leave before the storm shows up. The thing is that Milburn and I think it was Fifield, I could be wrong on that one, get lost. They actually left because they got freaked out by the decapitated engineer, and so they're freaked out there, and they end up getting lost. So that's of course going to cause them to, yeah. Let's just say that this is where like you could see kind of the alien influence on their characters, which I won't get into too much detail, and I'm not ruining anything by saying that it's more of the feeling of like what they're encountering, that whole deal. I don't really want to get into too much more detail in terms of plot, so I'll just mention what stands out for me is Michael Fassbender playing David. He played it so well, very fantastic. I mean, if there's a reason to watch this movie, it's for Michael Fassbender as David. Like, I believe that he could probably get a Best Supporting Actor for the Oscars if it doesn't get swept under the rug. That's the problem with movies that come out around this time of the year, is that by the time the Oscar noms come, it'll probably get swept under the rug. And it may just be a little bit of infatuation at the time, and maybe later on, like, oh yeah, that Anyways, I guess I'll mention some cons. Is that the plot really does disappear by the third act. So after the second act, like any semblance of plot kind of disappears, as opposed to not action pieces, but more of people having to run. And let's just say that if there is a sequel to this movie, which based off of the ending, they're planning on it, there's still a lot of questions that aren't answered. Like I said, the very beginning of the movie, you see the guy drink the black stuff. He dies. Why does he die? Like, what was that? Like, we don't have any explanation. Of course, like they leave some of it open, I think, so that maybe this ties in, and not necessarily that this ties in closer to the movie Alien, but I think they're trying to tie it in closer in terms of timeline to Alien, because I guess I kind of already ruined it. It's an Alien universe. It's in the Alien universe. It's not necessarily a prequel to Alien, but here's the one thing I should mention. You get the ending, which kind of leaves on a little bit of not so much a cliffhanger, but it doesn't end on a conclusive note. Like you get it. I almost gave away the ending. Anyways, so you got the ending, and all of a sudden there's this scene that happens after the ending, which I assume was filmed as a post-credits roll scene. Like after the credits roll, this is what that's where it should have been, and I don't know if they decided to, like, if Fox or if Ridley Scott, whoever, decided to put that in front. It didn't match with what was going on, and the ending came very abruptly, in my opinion. So and actually, before I forget, one other thing, another complaint, and you're probably going to be a little surprised by my score based off of the complaints, but there's a lot of lack of development. There's a lot of lack of attachment to the characters, because whatever characters, let's say, as an example, Milburn, which, like I said, I don't remember which character he was, if he was the geologist or if he was the guy who was alongside him. Like, let's say he dies a quarter of the way into the movie, you don't have enough time to get attached to the character to care, and that seems to happen where a character, we don't get enough of a feel for a lot of these characters that you care about if they live or die. Like it doesn't matter after a while. You're just like, oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, with those complaints aside, it was actually quite an interesting movie to watch. It looks like it's a slightly over 2 hours long, and I gotta admit the production values are insane. Like whatever, how every penny was well spent in my opinion. Like it was a very well acted cast. It was very well, like the special effects were very good. I watched this in 2D, by the way, not 3D. But there was one scene in particular with David where he ends up seeing like the engineer's map, and it just explodes. It was really cool. And when I mean explodes, I don't mean a physical explosion. Like it blows up in front of him, and he's like in the middle of this map. It's really cool looking. And like if I would have wanted to watch one, been it. The rest of the movie, like it's clear that it was a post 3D conversion. So okay, I think I kind of gave you guys my pros, my cons, favorite. My favorite thing was David for sure. So that being said, a score for Prometheus, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. It's good. Not great, not spectacular, but it's definitely worth a watch. It can be violent from time to time, but it's kind of, I think it's tame in relation to in terms of Alien, in my opinion. But that's just me. So once again, 4 out of 5 for Prometheus.